Thank you everyone for joining. So welcome to turning toward one another, turning toward each other. We're going to spend a lot of time in a very particular kind of conversation today. But before we do any of that, I thought I would start with just a brief incantation before I provided an overview of what we're going to talk about. And the incantation is really about bringing in the three kinds of beings that are available: beings of the past, beings of the present, and beings of the future. So join with me in this invocation. We invoke the beings of the past. Be with us now, all of you who have gone before, our ancestors and our teachers. You who walked and loved and faithfully tended this earth. Be present with us now. And may we carry on the legacy that you gave to us. Aloud and silently in our hearts, we say your names as we see your faces. And we call on the beings of the present, all you with whom we live and work on this precious planet. Be with us now. All our fellow humans and siblings of other species, open us to your collective wisdom. And again, aloud and silently, we say your names and picture your faces. And lastly, we invoke the beings of the future, you who will come after us on this earth. Be with us now, because it is for your sakes too that we work to heal our world. We cannot picture your faces or say your names because you do not have them yet. But we feel the reality of your claim on life. May we be faithful in the work that must be done so that there will be for you, as there was for our ancestors, blue sky, fruitful land, clear waters. Bless this time, dear beings. And so it is. So with those beings with us, we've just done the first piece of turning toward one another. It's turning toward those beings. And that kind of connection actually helps bring some joy. There's something about what happens when someone tells us the truth, that it brings us joy. Even if the truth that they're telling us is something a little bit hard or difficult, there's something about that that brings us a little bit of joy, if we have the patience and the presence of mind to slow down. And so one of the best ways I've found to sort of bring presence, my own presence in, and to create space for presence is through gratitude, a very particular kind of gratitude practice. And so this practice actually that we're going to start our day with here is maybe very familiar to you. It's just completing sentences. So I'm going to say half a sentence, and then the invitation is for you to either raise your hand and complete the sentence aloud for the group here, or you can complete the sentence in chat. Either one of those are welcome. But the goal is to not really think through the thing that you're going to say. It's actually to start saying the sentence and then complete it with some sense of spontaneity. So once you've sort of said your answer to whatever the sentence is, then your next job is to listen to other people's sentences as supportively and attentively as possible, really attending to what they're saying. So again, option one, raise your hand, we'll unmute you and you can complete the sentence in the room. Option two, type it into chat. So the first sentence that you're going to complete is, something I love about being alive on Earth is, and my only caution here is be specific. So don't talk in generalities like I love nature or I love animals, like be specific. Something I love about being alive on Earth. And so if you want to raise your virtual hand, we will call on you there. You can do that under the reactions button at the bottom of your screen, unless you're on an older version, and then it is in your participants window. Something I love about being on Earth is the bird songs that find me, daffodils standing next to trees, spiritual path as a Sufi. We'll continue saying some, but I will begin with Susie. Susie, if you want to unmute.
I love waking up to sunshine coming in, the sunrise out my window, especially, unfortunately, on a day when there's some pollution in the air, because the colors are amazing.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dia. I was going to say coffee.
Coffee. Yeah.
I gave it up for 6 months and I'm creeping back to it, and it's exciting. But also graduations are happening and they've been through so much. And today's the first day my baby squirrels are coming out of their squirrel box and scurrying down my building to explore. And they look just like they're looking at me like I'm okay.
Nice. Nice. I'm seeing also in chat, each day is a new adventure. I have no idea what it will be. Watching birds riding the currents of air. Yes. Breathing fresh air and knowing that it's connected in exchange with the plants, oxygen and carbon dioxide. Interacting with my grandkids, birds singing, blue sky and fresh air, my feline companion, chocolate, learning. Lovely. Here's another sentence to complete, and it starts with, a place that was magical to me as a child was. A place that was magical to me as a child was. The bookmobile, the woods behind my house. Diana, did you have one? I'll let you unmute there.
Florida. We used to go when I was a kid.
Florida, lovely. And I'm sure everyone is seeing all of these beautiful things in the chat. Here's your next sentence. A person in my life who helped me believe in myself was. Teachers, mothers, fathers, aunts, grandmothers. Bosses, animals, yeah. David Bowie, come on. Yeah. And the last sentence we're going to work with, some things that I appreciate about myself are. Some things that I appreciate about myself are. Mm. Mm. I'm curious to just hear from a couple of people if anything came up for you that was surprising as you completed those sentences. Feel free to raise your hand here. Yes, Renee.
Hi. The second last question you asked about who helped you believe in yourself,
Mm-hmm.
I was a little shocked at how it felt really hard to find someone.
Mm-hmm.
There was a dearth of that in the early part of my life. And so that really tapped into something painful, but my more recent spiritual journey has sort of helped me have gratitude for what is rather than lamenting that, and just being present with what's happened now. So I was able to then land in an answer, but I was a little bit like, oh, wow, that's really painful. There wasn't people.
Yeah,
Ouch.
yeah, beautiful.
So that was really interesting. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and stay with that pain. We're going to go there actually with our next step. But let me hear from one or two other people if there was anything that came up that was surprising. Dia.
That I lied. I have a family chat. There's like 16 people on it, and my dad passed, and so I took over the one who was warm and affirming, being that one. And I couldn't figure out how to put it without feeling like I was gloating. I spent my life not being warm, and in seminary changed things. So, thanks.
Coming clean. Great. So, one of the things that I'm always kind of amazed by is that these little sentences are tied with so much generosity and gratitude, and that gratitude has this way of turning our society on its head. And I've been so interested in the way that happens. And I think it has to do with the fact that gratitude contradicts the dominant message of our consumer society, that you're not enough, that the car that you own isn't enough, that you need something else. And that kind of society brings a sense of really profound dissatisfaction. But gratitude unearths something that's true about us that society would have us forget. And so for me, gratitude is a practice that allows us to become present to what really is. And I believe that, one of the things that we're going to be moving into for this next piece of work today is how can we remain present when we're sitting with the suffering and pain of the world? And I think that if we're going to be able to do that, we have to have a really profound practice of gratitude. And so we started there so that we would have that as the backdrop and foundation of everything that we're going to do for the rest of our time together. The other thing I think that will help us as we move into this next practice is breath. So the next practice that we're going to do is going into triads to speak and name the suffering that is really moving to you in the world. And so breath is what I invite you to do every time after someone has spoken and named the pain that they're feeling. The invitation is to breathe consciously. And also to notice just how natural breathing is, right? As if you're being breathed. So with the kind of conversation that we're going to move into, there's so much emotion And I just wanted to name that our world's in crisis, our world is suffering, and that brings about a lot of grief and sorrow. But it's also not just grief and sorrow. It's also a fear of what's going to happen to us, fears of what's going to happen to those that we love, anger and outrage at the motivations of other people that are causing problems, guilt and shame about our own complicity in that suffering, our own futility and powerlessness, those things show up. All of those are part of this pain that we're all feeling. And so this practice is about learning to be able to face those things, but being unblocked by the fear of them, really being liberated so that we don't have to be afraid of the pain. And so there's three kind of reminders that I would bring in here. One is that this pain is universal. Everyone feels it. Everyone feels it regardless of their party affiliation. Everyone feels it regardless of the rank or power that they have. We all have this sense of uncertainty, really radical uncertainty about whether life is going to go on. That's kind of new for our species. And so that's the second thing that I would name. So the fact that it's universal is the first thing. The second thing is that the anger and pain that's associated with it is unprecedented. Our ancestors faced war and plague and famine and sickness and death, of course, but they always had the assumption that life was going to go on. And that their life's work would be adding to a future generation. But that's on the table as a real question now. And it's a pivotal aspect of what's existing in the world right now. Which leads to the third thing that I would want you to remember, which is that we tend to block this kind of pain. Maybe because it's so huge, maybe because we think it would send us to some sort of irreparable despair. But this repression, this avoidance, this distancing of ourselves from the problem is widespread. And the result is that it renders us into a kind of passive obedience that contributes to our own bondage. So I think that's worth naming as we think about the stuff that brings about pain for us. So as we move into naming those things in our small groups, I want to just say a little bit about how to listen to other people's pain. So I like groups of three. So there's three things that I would want to remind you about how to listen. One is, well, actually, I'll name them sort of in the opposite. These are three ways to listen that aren't helpful. So one of them is to listen in a way where you believe that you know how someone else should feel. So pretending like you know how someone else should feel. That's ultimately really patronizing and it closes people down. In some ways that can sometimes show up as, why aren't you being more emotional about this? And that tends to sentimentalize things. So believing that you know something about how someone else should feel is one way to listen that's not helpful. A second one is judging someone's outward demeanor. So someone may seem unmoved, but you can't tell what someone else is feeling on the inside. They may be having a profound inner transformation that you can't observe. And so if you want to be unhelpful, judge someone else's outer demeanor. And the third way to be unhelpful is to immediately comfort. The thing with wanting to immediately comfort is that it sends the message that you are uncomfortable and you want them to stop. But the truth of pain is that our pain and our love are inseparable. So we can actually really trust our pain for the world. It may be really uncomfortable, but we can trust it. Hi, YouTubers. There's an invitation for you, and the invitation is for you to really think about and actually practice out loud each one of the prompts that we're going to describe to you. So this exercise is 4 parts. We'll introduce it to you one part at a time for you to be able to do at home, either by yourself or even preferably with someone else or with a couple of friends. And so this is the invitation for our sort of second step in turning toward one another, is we're going to send you into breakout groups of 3. And you're going to speak briefly to an issue that matters to you, something that you feel pain about. This can also include things that are happening personally too, right? The personal is not separate from what's happening in the world. And so the invitation is to speak about it in whatever way is authentic to you. You can cry, you can wail, you can speak to it with ease, you can just name it. You can speak in your mother tongue. It doesn't have to be spoken in English. But this is not an exercise in storytelling. So the power of you speaking your pain comes with some brevity and some silence. And so what you're going to do, you'll be in groups of 3, and each person will, one at a time, name their pain in whatever way they want to. And then you're going to sit in silence. So the total for each person is just 1 minute. Just 1 minute to name your pain. And then when you're done naming your pain, you will sit in silence until we send you a note that says you can move on to the next person. So you'll have a total of 4 minutes. We're going to send you to the breakout group. The first minute is just to settle and decide who's going to go first, second, and third. And then 1 minute per person. And just a reminder to breathe through anything that comes up. And again, you're not to comment on one another's pain. You're just to sit in silence with it. Welcome back, everyone. So this exercise, we just did the first part of this. There's 4 parts. So the second part, we're going to send you to the same breakout groups to do. One of you will have an additional person in their group. The second part is to speak to this same issue, whatever it was that brought about those feelings of pain or suffering for you. Speak to that issue from the perspective of someone who views it entirely differently than you. So this may be the view of an adversary. So for instance, if your issue was, I am really pained by the lack of racial justice in the world, you might speak about this issue in terms of, I'm so tired of everybody making everything about race. The invitation in this moment is to try to do it in whatever way you can so that you avoid sarcasm and exaggeration and fear, really. Some sarcasm may sneak in though. But the invitation is to try to really take on, it's almost like an acting challenge. See if you can take on the real perspective of someone who views this issue entirely different from you. And so you're going to be in your groups, and each one of you is going to have 2 minutes to speak as that person who views it entirely differently than you. Renee, you have a question?
Yes, I want to make sure I understand this. Do I take on the opposing view of my own issue, or does somebody else do that?
So you're going to now pretend as if you are someone who takes on an adversarial view from yours. So you want to use the language of I feel this particular way. I feel like people are talking about race too much. I wish that people would just see everybody the same, right? It's that sort of a voice that you would take on in this moment. So take on that voice and try to do it in any way that you can without exaggeration or sarcasm or fear. Darren.
Will you, are we going to start right pretty much when we get in this time, or is there going to be like 30 seconds to settle and you'll prompt to when the first person should go?
Yeah, so you'll have 1 minute to settle in before the first person would need to go.
Okay.
So it'll really be a breakout that's 7 minutes long. So 1 minute to settle and then 2 minutes for each person for a total of 7 minutes. And those of you who are in groups of 2, you'll have just a little bit more time. Any other questions? All right, I am reopening those rooms now. This first part was about getting present to who we are and the pain that we feel. And the second part is about reconnecting with our underlying connections, even with those people with whom we disagree, that there's something underneath all of that that is true and valuable. And I think that's the piece that we're hoping to get across here in this second piece. Welcome back, everyone. We're going to send you fairly quickly back into your groups because your next acting challenge is to speak now using, again, the I voice, but now you're going to be a non-human being who is impacted by this issue. So this could be the soil, a bird, a companion animal, a rock, the planet, the moon, a non-human being who is affected by this issue. So again, you'll have 1 minute to sort of gather your resources as a group, and then you're going to each be given 2 minutes to speak as the non-human being. And I'm opening your rooms up now. And so for the YouTubers on this piece, this third piece of the process, the goal is to move beyond an anthropocentric view that we're actually not humans who experience the natural world, but we're actually part of the natural world. And so speaking as part of the natural world is one of the ways that we can help dissolve this like, I am here to consume nature, I am here to take over nature, I'm here to control nature. And that's so important if we're going to be able to turn toward one another, because we need to turn toward the needs of ourselves as nature also. Welcome back, everyone. And your final acting challenge is to speak now about this issue on behalf of a future human who's affected by the choices that you're making around this issue. So this could be speaking on, one way to think about this is speaking on behalf of the 7th generation. In 7 generations, what are your choices going to mean to this person? And what are they going to want to say about the choices that are being made about this? So sending you back into those rooms, again, same timing, 1 minute to settle, 2 minutes each. And so YouTubers, the purpose of this last piece is for us to be able to move into a new view of time. I think frequently we think kind of with a traditional attitude of strategy, and it doesn't really think about how are the choices that we're making now going to affect people in the future. And if we're talking about any major change, we're talking about generational incremental change. And so thinking about the 7th generation is really useful, and being able to speak in their voice helps us to get connected to that. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you all for participating so open-heartedly in that exercise. We're going to run, usually we end these an hour after they started. We're just going to go for another 5 minutes or so. I just wanted to hear from a couple of folks about what that experience of doing those 4 steps was like. Feel free to raise your hand.
So as you can see, my kids are now here. My whole family ended up being part of it, which was really not expected, but it was a really powerful sharing. And based on how our stream of conscious went, this was actually the right energy for them to participate.
Yeah, yeah.
So thank you, Jono, for being part of that. Thank you for having this. This was phenomenal. Phenomenal. So thank you for facilitating this. I'm so grateful.
Love it. Thank you. Dia?
So I started off timid. I felt like I didn't know these 2 people. I got into the exercise. I hated you, Nathan. I was very angry about the exercise the second round. I didn't like it. There was validation, though, from Joshua. And I ended up being amused, feeling expanded, lighter, and listening to some of the other issues also with a sense of hope.
Mm-hmm.
Joshua was going to talk, but the idea that he presented that we're not so different than other people who've gone through things. So thank you. This is pretty brilliant. Leave it to you to make us lay actors, Nathan. It's beautiful.
Thanks, Dia. Joshua?
I felt like I was part of a 4-sided object shared by 3 people. And that each of the 4 sides, I mean, I kept thinking of a dreidel, you know, from Hanukkah, but because it's 4-sided and you can spin it around. But the fact that each of the 4 sides was so incredibly different experience, but I was experiencing it with the same, it was the same 3 people, and our energies changed, our outlooks changed. There was a knowing of each other that, frankly, I didn't even think would happen in such a short time. It was miraculous that I went from, I'm really angry, I don't like this topic, to something that we could all laugh at. And it surprised me because I didn't expect laughter to be the effect of something that you started calling radical uncertainty. I mean, that's radical uncertainty doesn't sound like on the continuum of I'm going to end up laughing. So that was a big surprise, and I love surprises because I didn't know where you were going, and I couldn't guess where you were going. I just had to be in the moment and was sharing it with 2 other people. Marianne, is it Dea or Dia?
Dia.
Dia. I mean, we were really in those moments during being in those moments, and that's very special.
Thank you, Joshua. Susie?
First, I want to say thank you, Nathan. This was an amazing experience. So well done, so well thought out. I was surprised at the humanity that came up for each of us, especially when we were in our non-human form. That it almost certainly liberated me to really feel the emotion of my anger, my hope, my dreams. Thanks again.
Yeah.
And thanks to my audience, my 2 people that I was working with.
Thank you, Susie. I'm reminded as you say that a story I heard about Thich Nhat Hanh being asked by his students, "Beloved teacher, what must we do for the world?" And of course, they were all thinking that his answer was going to be something like, "We need to balance our inner work with the outer work," or something like that. And his answer was to hear within ourselves the sound of the earth crying. That was the thing that we most needed to do for our world. Go ahead, Susie.
So ironically, I was the earth in my group.
Beautiful. Darren.
First off, I'm demonstrating what not to do in terms of lighting on Zoom, you know. So just, you know, I'm a stickler for that, but just so you know, I'm aware of it. Along the lines of what Josh shared, it's because I couldn't anticipate where my partners were going, I really just had to be present and listen and be with it. And even with myself, you know, when we got to the part of speaking from the other point of view, the second exercise, I was like, I don't know where I'm going to go with. I don't know how I'm going to speak to that, because my issue was about the rampant lying that is happening, and that just, you know, and I was like, how am I going to speak to the other side of people lying? But it came through, and but like I said, I think it was just, you know, the idea of, you know, with spiritual companioning is to listen without an agenda, or listen or asking questions that you can't possibly know the answer to. And so this was like, I had no idea where my partners were going to go with their opposite point of view, or the non-human, and then the descendant. And it was really lovely to just be present and let it come to me, and just to be with it. So this was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you all. Just, you know, I hope that this experience for everyone was useful in terms of like, there's all sorts of ways for us to connect with one another and to turn toward one another, especially the beings that we don't think of immediately to turn toward, that are actually there for us. And so with that, I just want to, as we play this closing song, just invite you all to feel this closing song with us, and to also just release the beings of the 3 times that were with us, the beings, our ancestors, the beings, the present beings that are speaking with such wisdom to us, and the beings that don't have names and faces yet. Just release them with such gratitude for their presence here with us as we listen to our final song. David. Thank you all. You're free to unmute yourselves and chat into the room if you want to.
Thanks, Nathan. This was fabulous. Oh my God.
Good night, Nathan.
Amazing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Good night, everybody.
Nathan.
Bless your heart.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nathan.
And
Thank you
Joan,
so much.
Fabulous.
Joan, thank you for staying up until, isn't it 2:15 in the morning?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, great.
Always loving it. So good.
Amazing.